Last year I made a video entitled "Should Ireland Withdraw from Eurovision?" If you haven't seen that video, I recommend that you go and check it out. Spoiler alert, my thoughts were Ireland should withdraw for a period of no more than 2 years to restructure themselves, as I felt that the process clearly wasn't working. Brooke gave an amazing performance in Turin and did not deserve, in my opinion, to finish in 15th place out of 18 contestants in her semi-final. I think that Ireland's brand at Eurovision is so badly damaged that a short-term withdrawal is the only way to try to salvage their reputation and clean the slate for potential 2025 or 2026 entry. I firmly believe that Ireland should leave Eurovision for the next 2 years to reassess and restructure. I think it is now clear for all to see that Ireland clearly doesn't know what it's doing, and ploughing headlong into a half-hearted selection contest year after year with the goal of qualifying for the final isn't working. Ireland hasn't had the recipe for success, and not only that, it doesn't even have any ingredients to make a half-decent stab at a good semi-final result, which really and truly upsets me. However, as we now know, RTE have already signalled their intent at competing in Sweden next year and have made the call for would-be performers to enter a song. As the distinction of the most successful nation at Eurovision with the most wins is quietly buried as a result of Sweden's latest win, how low can Ireland sink and how much more can their legend be further diminished before someone at RTE decides to do something? This lacklustre attitude is both disappointing from a national level and embarrassing on an international one. In a sporting context, if the manager couldn't get the country to qualify for 5 straight contests, questions would be being asked as to the process. Public service broadcasters are civil servants, and I understand the budgetary limitations that are placed upon them. However, the tick box attitude towards Eurovision isn't going to cut it. I do understand that Michael Keeley's hands are tied, so I'm not putting the blame on him per se. When Sweden failed to qualify for the final in 2010, public broadcaster SVT held crisis talks and resolved that this could never happen again, and lo and behold, it hasn't. This argument about Ireland being a small nation really doesn't stack up. Ireland has a comparable population to Finland, and in 2021 Finland scored a 6th place with Blind Channel, and this year in Liverpool came 2nd with Karja. The UMK national final is a showcase of how YLE uses their limited resources to put on a first-rate show. In addition, UMK is a powerful showcase of modern-day Finnish talent. Even small nations like Moldova, who have a population of about 3.4 million, still managed to make it to the final, and last year came 5th place. Ireland is also a wealthy nation with significant resources at their disposal, so arguments about population size and resources can be very easily struck down. The Icelandic national final trumps what RTE are putting forward, and Iceland have a population of about 300,000 people. The next argument is national interest, and I have to concede that 94% of the population watch the Eurovision Song Contest in Iceland. I understand that national interest in Eurovision within the Irish nation isn't what it once was. When national interest slips, it can be hard to regain momentum, but I would argue doing better in the competition helps to drive interest. It is cyclical. Good results equals enhanced interest. The same thing happened in the United Kingdom. Years of poor results led to diminished interest to the point where Eurovision was viewed with outright disdain in the nation. I'd also argue that not taking part in Eurovision would give the Irish public a chance to miss being part of the process, and could also allow the fans and the nation alike a chance to enjoy Eurovision without the pressure of having to produce a good result. I need to move on to look at the national final competition now more specifically. For those that don't know, Irish national broadcaster RTE turned their Friday night talk show, The Late Late Show, into a Eurovision selection show. They literally retrofit the selection process into their Friday night show and allow the Irish and UK public to vote on who should represent them at the competition. This year there were 6 acts in the competition like last year. However, the calibre of the selection is highly questionable. This, I have to say, is not meant as a personal attack on any of the artists taking part. I'm only pointing out where they are on a professional musical journey and asking how this can help to serve the cause of winning or at least doing well at Eurovision. I'll start with Donegal singer Leila Jane, who came in last after the national selection results were revealed. After the performance, Leila felt aggrieved that her performance did not come across well on television and felt the essence of it was not effectively captured by the RTE television cameras. It transpired that this was Leila's first time on television, so how would she know how to reconfigure her performance for television if she had never been on the medium before? Algie too had the same issues when trying to hit his camera marks, and Connolly, who was a favourite to win, had never even had a gig before. The only performers with significant experience were controversial anti-Eurovision anarchist Public Image Limited and Dublin-based band Wild Youth. I felt that the inclusion of Public Image Limited was a cheap and lazy attempt by RTE to garner publicity for the Eurosong contest. However, I have to concede it did work. John Lydon was giving interviews across British media about the competition and his desire to compete for Ireland. Segments on Good Morning Britain helped to boost interest in Eurosong and was also being written about in the British Independent, Guardian and Sun newspapers. I would, however, question the cost this came at and if this is what RTE are willing to do to garner attention for the Eurovision selection contest suggests for them that clicks should come over competition. I do think that it's disappointing to see, and it's unfair on the other artists who are earnestly competing for a shot to represent the nation at the biggest music competition on the planet.
And I feel like we actually come alive the bigger the stage and the bigger the crowd.
Eventual victors Wild Youth, I felt, were drastically underprepared for what the Eurovision contest would bring. Wild Youth crafted a very generic Euro-friendly pop song that borrowed the Eurovision slogan, "We are one," from the Swedish hosted contest from 10 years ago. Co-writer Jörgen Olausson, a Swede, would have been keenly aware of this, and it's a mystery why they chose this avenue to go down. Perhaps someone is feverishly pecking away at the keyboard in Stockholm or Malmo on behalf of the Irish, writing a song called Join Us. It might go something like this. You ready? Your expectations we won't defy, all we want is to qualify. Singing a song on the global stage, never looking to turn a page. The Eurovision glory days are far behind, the Irish public don't seem to mind. The song was co-penned by a Swede, doesn't matter if the scoreboard we don't lead. A generic pop ballad you might enjoy, simplistic melodies we will employ. Just going to show up, got a box to tick, our song probably isn't one you will pick. Afterwards we learn nothing and do the same again. Just can't seem to get out of this pain. Another year of misery, let's not make a fuss. We've won 7 times, you know. Europe, join us! That's not my entry. I think that Wild Youth went about sanitizing who they were to appeal to a Eurovision audience. Europe can smell this inauthenticity from a mile or kilometre away. I enjoyed some of Wild Youth's earlier songs when researching them, but I felt this essence was abandoned when it came to Eurovision, and everything was re-engineered to be as Euro-friendly as possible. While people may argue Ireland is improving year on year, I have to disagree with this. Last year Ireland finished up with 3 countries behind them in their semi-final. This year Ireland finished up with 3 countries behind them in their semi-final with just 10 points. Last year Brooke got 47. There were also less countries in the contest this year. Wild Youth finished up in position 31 out of 37 in 2023, and Brooke in 2022 finished up 34 out of 40 nations. So although it may look that Ireland has improved 3 spots, there are 3 less nations. So it could easily be argued that Ireland has pretty much stayed the same. And from a points perspective, there has been a definite decrease. Interestingly enough, 2 of the nations that finished behind Ireland in 2022, Montenegro and Bulgaria, have since withdrawn from the competition, and Bulgaria of course came second in the recent past. I've heard people saying that Sophie Lennon, who placed 4th at Junior Eurovision last year, should represent Ireland. However, placing all our hopes in an albeit very talented 14-year-old doesn't seem like a solid strategy for Eurovision glory in the foreseeable future. In addition, I have heard Irish fans calling on TG4, another public service broadcaster in Ireland, to take over the running of the Eurovision entry. However, I think that taking the Eurovision selection off RTE and giving it to another broadcaster with even less experience and presumably even less resources is not a good idea. I think that RTE is the only show in town that has a chance of turning Ireland's fortunes around. I don't believe they should be allowed to shirk this responsibility. As Eurovision fans, we can often be accused of existing in an echo chamber, and the common sentiment that exists outside of the Eurovision bubble is apathy. However, I would argue it is on the broadcaster and those running the Eurovision process in the country to turn that around. The BBC in neighbouring UK had to work hard to turn the perception of Eurovision round. Years of poor results and disappointment with the competition has led to delusion and disinterest. This can't be turned around overnight, but a good Irish Eurovision entry can set the country on a more positive track and start to rebuild interest within the country. This interest needs to extend beyond the fandom of Irish Eurovision and captures the hearts and imaginations of the Irish general public if it is to stand a chance. I want to make a special shout out at this point in time to Ireland's Eurosong Future, I'm Sorry 0 Points, and Eurovision, who along with this channel have Ireland's best interests at heart. Ireland is a nation of music lovers with a wealth of writing and performing talent. Like the UK, many are dumbfounded as to why Ireland isn't doing better. The first thing to do is to extract the national selection process from the Late Late Show once and for all. With Ryan Tubridy now being replaced as presenter of the Late Late Show by fellow Northerner Patrick Keelty and RTE's call for song submissions not specifically mentioning Eurosong, it could perhaps mean that the selection is taken out of this stilted format. In previous years we had seen programmes like Eurostar select the entry, and Mickey Jo Hart of course came 11th in Riga in 2003. That alone has to count for something, right? Even a broadcast in a more performance-friendly arena like the Helix or 3 Olympia would be a step in the right direction. After any disappointing results, people are almost always looking someone to blame, and the blame usually falls on the door of one Michael Keeley, the head of the Irish delegation. However, I don't think that's entirely fair. Michael is essentially a civil servant who is tasked with running a selection and leading the delegation to Eurovision. I think that he is operating under the same apparatus that would apply to anyone in his position. My question to him would be, are you maximising your contacts, and have you tried working with record labels to source talent? Recruiting first-time singers-songwriters and people who have never been on television before would suggest to me that you haven't. The selection of Wild Youth, I believe in retrospect, was probably the best option based on what the calibre of talent that was on display on the night. Wild Youth had the most experience performing to large crowds and had TV experience. Wild Youth are a very popular act in Ireland with a lively and spirited fan base. However, when taken out of Ireland and placed alongside the transcontinental European acts, their package wilted quickly under the harsh glare of the Eurovision stage lights. The Eurovision stage acts as a magnifying glass and shows up anything that is half-hearted or underprepared to 160 million people. Watching Wild Youth on the Tuesday evening semi-final of Death, they looked woefully out of their depth, as Conor O'Donoghue cavorted amidst the pyrotechnics and held the microphone at waist-height level. I think we as fans were resigned to the fate of Ireland and implicitly understood that 2023 was going to be labelled as yet another non-qualification year. An ill-advised tweet following the performance from Conor said they never gave Ireland a chance. The they in this case would be the global televote, as the semi-finals of course are now televote only. To make a comment like this is ill-informed and also shows how deluded the band were. Looking at Loreen, Karya, Noah Kirel, Alessandra and Let 3, did Wild Youth honestly think they were going to stand out against these world-class performances? Ireland were definitely not robbed in 2023, as hard as that is for me to say, and a half-hearted, undercooked, generic pop ballad is not going to be something people will pick up the phone for. which of course, as I say, is a real shame for all those people who work hard and save their money all year to attend Eurovision with the express intention of supporting Ireland. As this is now the 5th year of non-qualification, if you include 2020, I imagine there will be more than a few people who booked their flight back to Dublin for the Wednesday morning. Again, I need to make it very clear here, I am not attacking the performers, it is not their fault. They are making the best of what is afforded to them. Any singer-songwriter is going to jump at the chance to represent the nation on the biggest global stage. My argument is that they are not being set up for success. If I was to put myself through the process, I wouldn't fare any better. You heard my rap. The process is set up to fail anyone that decides to put themselves through it. The approach isn't working, and turning around and blaming the global audience isn't going to help matters. There are a number of things that I think Ireland can do to turn things around, and those are what I want to discuss in the next video. I think that every problem has a solution, and in the next video I will be outlining a strategy of how I believe that things could be turned around and the rationale behind the recommendations that I am making. Be sure to join me for that. I hope you enjoyed this video, and please let me know what you think Ireland needs to do in the comments section below. I look forward as always to reading those comments, but until that next video, you take care and I'll see you very soon.